Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Work at Home Rockstar Podcast. Excited for today's episode. And we are talking to the host of Winner's Paradigm Podcast and also the CEO of Alpha Influence Media. And what he does is he helps men dive into what they're currently doing in life and helps them stack up their wins to align themselves with their definition of success. Super excited to be rocking out here with Alundas Havens. Hey, you ready to rock?
Yes, sir. Thank you again, brother. It's a tremendous honor.
Awesome. Right on. Well, I'm excited for this interview with another podcaster.
Yes, sir.
So we always start off here on a good note. So tell me a story of success in your business that we can be inspired by.
Yes, sir. So for me, brother, podcasting really allowed me to be able to dive into the personal side of the house and really heal from some trauma, whether that was generational or growing up. My parents were strict, but they had their ways, narcissistic, alcoholics. So it was something where it was deep, and then went into the military, got injured in the military, started repeating some of the things that I seen and really started living a life that I didn't agree with, and having projections because it's something where I'm pointing things out and in podcasting, doing that inner work and journaling and getting the help I need, getting a breathwork coach, like all these things were happening to where it led me back to that same thing and led me to help another man and being like, man, the reason why in my podcast is called the Winner's Paradigm is really, figuring out the way that we process information and how we can stack those wins, how we can be able to align ourselves to where we want to be. So I talk to men about doing the shit that I'm not cool with, things that don't abide by me. That's not my core values. Yes, I did something stupid. I used to be a big drinker. That revolved into the negative thinking and why I made bad decisions versus now where it's like, man, I'm all dialed in at what I'm doing. I'm trying to be the best dad and husband I can be. Every podcast is about being present. Like it's a different shift when you put that work into yourself. And that was something that podcasting let me do.
Wow. And you know what? I mean, you're definitely serving in a hard market because men don't typically dig into themselves very freely, do they?
No, brother. And that was something as well that I do is just speak to that point where I'm talking about the frustrations, our relationships. Maybe we did something in our relationship that is tough, and now we're talking about divorce or whatever it is. So I share those things as well where I'm like, man, I've been there. I've done the stupid shit. Like, I know where you're at. I know where you're like, oh, you tell your mentor, hey, you can F off because you don't know what you're talking about. But they do know what they're talking about. Maybe we are drinking more. Maybe we look in the mirror, we don't measure up. Like I've been through that. I've been through all those things. I have friends that died, gave me a negative perception on life, and then realized like, man, my people died young. You know what I mean? So they didn't get the chance to have kids, to do this, to do whatever. Now we're doing it. So it was something for me where it's like, I just target that man and talk about how vulnerable it is, how it was when I was going through those two things. And then they're able to see like, man, he gets it. He went through it. Same thing when I interview people, talk about the dumb things they did back then, if they got into trouble, what led them to success. Because I feel like that's something, we hear, you hear the cliches, it's so easy, but like, man, you don't know until you heard somebody from your walk of life or went through very similar things as you. Then you're going to realize like, oh, I can do it. Maybe it's just the mindset, or maybe I've been wrapped up in this thing for years or grew up a certain way and I'm still acting that way. Like, it's all right. You know what I mean? You can always change.
Yeah, you can always change. Yeah, especially if you look inward. And I like your approach because really when it comes down to it, people want to know that first of all, if you're going to model somebody, you're going to want to make sure that they're in a place where you want to be. And if you can get to a place where they want to be, having done all the things that they're doing wrong, well, then they know that they can get to that place as well, right?
100%. And I think that starts with us just looking ourselves in the mirror and realizing what we are. It's tough. There's some tough things. And again, it goes to me like there's some things I'm not proud of that I did. And I like to talk about those things. You know what I mean? I like to talk about, oh, yeah, I was a big drinker and I did this dumb thing. And you know what? Like, that's not who I am. That's not what resonates with me. You know what? Maybe I repeated some generational trauma and acted stupid. I used to drink a lot and that was my personality, and then shifted out of that. And it was something where it was complete game changer because I'm talking about, yeah, man, like craziest man walking through the room. And then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, brother, how's your family? What are the core values like? Man, what have you been doing? Man, I'm just trying to be present with the family lately. And they're like, what's going on with this guy? And really thinking to myself, like, what's going on? What are the gaps? But yes, you can make that transition. You can still heal, become the best version. But like along that way, there's going to be some shit that pops up. And I think that's where we need to be able to talk to people, is being able to say that. Like I got cocky once with one of my friends. man, I don't feel like I can drink anymore. I don't get anxiety. I'm good, man. Let me tell you, I was home for the weekend that time because my wife, her and the baby want to go see family. And I was home by myself, and like I have alcohol at that time. I had alcohol in my house just as a reminder. People come over, and bro, that was so hard. I had to dump everything out because I was like, I just wanted to drink. So I called up my buddy, that's a substance abuse counselor, and I was like, hey man, I know we were just talking. I got cocky, but life hit, and now I really want to drink. So it was being able to get that person to help me because it was something that I was battling through, to where if we're able to show that vulnerable side, we're showing people that we're people, we've been there, done that, they've been there. I think that's where that impact happens, brother.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean that kind of does talk a lot into the next topic, which is the bad note, right? Because it's for you, it sounds like they're very intertwined together. Your good and bad notes are constantly going, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's something where it's a self actualization and coming to grasp with it, but it's also hearing that constructive criticism. Maybe your spouse says something from you. For me, I realized that characteristics that I said I hated, what I didn't like, and then I start repeating it. I would say, for instance, I'm not going to be, surface level, but I would say like I hate when people be slick or say whatever, and then I realize like that's me. Or when I'm drinking, that's where the shit just rolls out, and I just don't care, and I'm just doing my own thing, or maybe I got wrapped up into my own head to where I'm really cautious about my surroundings because I've been around, tough neighborhoods or tough people, and got into it when I didn't need to be, so it's one thing where heads on a swivel. I'm always looking versus just being like, hey man, like things aren't bad. You don't need to be in fight or flight mode. You don't need to be trying to survive all the time. Or if my wife's yelling at me, I don't have to realize that I think she's yelling when in reality she's raising her voice because she's at the other side of the house and we have a big house. So it was something for me where it was like all these different things could trigger you, could lead to that. I was really reactive. It's to a point now where I'm starting to process information and slow it down. But why am I reactive? Well, my parents living in that house was difficult. Also had to raise the stepdad in the mix. So had to be very careful at what I said or how I dressed because he was always going to say something about it. And he wants to go on his tangent and say something. Well, then I want to pop up and be like, hey man, I don't agree with what you say. So for me, being that reactive kept me alive during that time. But then in my marriage, it ruined it because again, I'm fighting with my wife all the time for nothing, just because I want to be right. And it's like, bro, do you get the bigger picture? Like, is that really what you want to do? Is just waste time on your guys' hands, being upset, angry, versus like actually being able to communicate or maybe cooling down. So for me, it's been that process, brother, putting that work in and sharing that with people, which allows me to get better because I'm listening to myself, I'm hearing it, I'm doing it. You definitely get closer to where you want to be, even though it may be a long journey that you're still having.
I think I've experienced a lot of the same things as you have. I've definitely made many crazy mistakes as well. But when it comes to triggers is a topic that I think we need to be talking a lot more about, especially in men, because we tend to get triggered. I don't know if it's more easily or not, but I do know that the triggers that tend to come up, like when you are triggered by something, there is definitely something inside you. And one of the realizations that I made is I thought about how you can have two people and you have somebody that says something, the same thing to both people. One person freaks out, gets super mad, and the other person just shrugs. Why is that? It's the same. You said the person said the same thing. So there's got to be something with us if we're getting triggered. Because if the guy next to me is not getting triggered, it's me, not the person who said it to me, right?
100%, brother. And I went through that because again, I'm real reactive. So sometimes, and it goes into, when I was younger, as well as, the respect side of the house when around people, it's like, to me, those are fighting words. So I just want to fight. I was talking to my wife about this one time, but we went to, she's in the Navy. So they had, some of her friends had a little party one day. And yeah, here goes my ass. I got crossfaded that day. So I already started dabbling into cannabis when I got out the military because I started working on PTSD and really processing my emotions, journaling, crying it out. So one day I'm over here like going through my emotions, and then I'm like, oh yeah, so journaling, doing it, da da da. Do you want to go to this party? We go. So I start drinking. So I'm over here not in the right mind, and we see this dude, And she didn't introduce me to him, but he kept smiling at her, looking back at me and that. And in my head, I'm like, knock this dude out. You could do it, blah, 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 and that's the liquor speaking. That's me not being in the right mind. So I was angry. I looked out of it in pictures and stuff. So it was something where we both realized like, okay, that's probably not something we should be doing. And I started working on that. But it was really having the control and realizing like, hey, why do I feel this emotion? Well, something arose to me. I felt like you heavily disrespected me. Then I gave myself some grace. I said, hey, I'm glad you didn't punch that dude in the face and you went to jail or whatever it is, because that was something. I just didn't sense that. She picked it up as well that he did something. She was proud of me because she was like, hey, you didn't start anything. But it was the little things on that. Or for instance, like I worked with a guy that was big in the podcast industry. Love the man to death. He's a great human being. But I don't align with him from a marketing perspective just because he says controversial things. And sometimes I'm like, man, and I get emotionally charged by what he says or a post or whatever it is, right? Why? Because that's a projection for me. I've been there as a man. I've done that. I've said these things. I've been aggressive when we don't need to be. What does that lead us to do? And that's a lot of what people do is we project on it or talk about what we don't like because we've done it ourselves. So that's again, I go back to that point and I have to be able to talk about things with people and be like, hey man, I've messed up too. So I forgive you. I understand you, because people think that we just put them on this floor. We say you got to be perfect. You got to do these things. Like, man, I've been there. I've done that. You know what I mean? I've done the dumb decisions that my wife should have left me. So now if you want to talk about it, I'll talk about it all day and be like, hey man, this is where I failed. And this is how I'm able to do better. This is why I'm serious about what I do, why I read every day, why I try to get a workout in. I think about being positive, keeping good people around me. It's not that I don't like you. It's just I need that good energy, because anybody that's negative or brings those things to you, it's just only going to weigh you down and you're not going to be able to be the best you can be. So that's where I really talk to men and jam on that, brother.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. Well, and you can't change anything that you're not aware of. And as soon as you become aware of it, you start talking about it, then it becomes something that you can actually work on. If you just keep on bottling it up, it's not going to get any better, right?
100%. And again, that's tough because there's some things with us that either happen, in our childhood that are extreme. And then there's some things that maybe we just don't talk about because as a man, you got to be tough. So for me, my dad was tough as nails, abusive, narcissistic again. So some of the shit that I said that I see from him and view him don't resonate with me. Why? Because a lot of characteristics are the same. The authoritative, not being able to have conversations. So that's why I get upset with people when they're like one way or just stubborn versus being like accepting and be like, you know what, I understand. Like, I'm really grateful I had that so I can be the best dad I can be and not model some of these actions that I did or now am not doing anymore. So that way it was allowing me to be able to get better, because I didn't realize it until putting things together, hearing it from multiple people. Hey man, like, you good? Like, why are you getting upset? Why are you doing this? Or why are you trying to scream? So I actually had a podcast episode recently where me and the guests are like getting angry and we're going into the David Goggins type voice and we're like talking on it. And it was cool because it was that episode, but that's no longer me every single episode. So it was pretty cool. It's like you can amplify it and show people the level and the importance and use your voice in a great way versus, always talking to them and getting them to think of something where that's not the picture.
Yeah. Well, I like to talk about practice as well. And it sounds to me like you've got some pretty good rituals, I guess. You like to get to the gym and all that stuff. But, can you elaborate on that a little bit more? Like, what's your, view about getting better?
So this is all relative to what's important to you. And definitely it happened to me recently to where I had to go back to the drawing board and figure out what was something that's important to me. I believe in God, but I've never really been a man of faith. I fall into the category of picking out, what other people were saying, and I'm a Christian and this and bringing in politics. I don't believe that at all. You know what I mean? So if you want to talk about politics and bring in, religion, I'm not going to agree with you because I don't agree it that way. I agree everybody should believe in whatever they want to, because again, one of the projections a lot of people do, we talk about, hey, it should be this way, you should do this, and then get mad at other people for doing what they want to do when we want to do our own thing. So something for me where it was just like, I prayed to God, man. And I was just like, God, I need a sign, so one of my boys was praying the next day, calls me, hey man, do you need anything? Like, I didn't know, me and him never talked on that level. We talked about business and so forth. And that's where we're like good friends. We interviewed podcasts, but it was cool, being able to do that. So religion is one thing where I've always done it. I've always been meditating throughout this journey now. So I meditate a lot now, getting into prayer, reading the Bible slowly. but really just focusing on my connection. It's not about anybody else, and that's where it's been different, is really taking that. For me on this spiritual side, where it's meditating, like I always take that time every single day to just wake up, be grateful for what happened. Like I'm grateful I have a house. I never thought I was gonna be able to have a house young, a family. We have another baby on the way. So just really being grateful to be alive every day. Cause like I said, I had 5 good friends, my grandfather that died, and it changed me forever, because I'm like, I can't live my life without these people, or 3 of them I was really close with. So it was tough for me, where it was battling those demons, thinking about that. So also another portion, I tore all the cartilage in my right knee while I was in the Marine Corps, have bad knees, ankle, all my joints basically aching every day, feeling bad. So figuring out what practices work for me. My podcast is actually sponsored from a CBD company, because one of my buddies that I interviewed started helping me out. So it's taking CBD and helping my joints so I can be able to get a workout that day. So whether it's walking, it's doing whatever, it allows me to be able to get moving, because I know when I don't get moving and I'm not doing things, especially being home, I also take care of my daughter during the day while I run the business and work on everything. Extremely frustrating sometimes. And I want to start eating and I want to do all these things. So you got to have that outlet. And then that starts with the community aspect as well. It's like, what are you doing? I know people are masterminds, stuff like that. I've been in them. A lot of them are cool. Some of them don't resonate with me, but I'm in one called the Dad Edge, and it's all about being a better dad and focusing on that. So it's awesome with the community perspective, to where I was having a tough time. I go to this community, I'm like, hey, crying my eyes out. This is what happened to me. They're like, hey, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to become a better man. I've been there, done that. So the community aspect's been amazing, because I'm able to get that and learn about things, whether it's, from experience or learning from somebody else. But you really have to dial in that portion when you're taking care of yourself, using the tools, be around the people you want to be around. And even if you're in a mastermind or you're having a coach and they don't align with you anymore, that's okay. You can be able to move on and say, hey, at this point in time, I feel like where I want to be and what aligns with my core values is different than what I'm currently doing right now. And that's okay to do as well.
Absolutely, for sure.
Hey, Rockstar. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Work at Home Rockstar podcast. If you didn't know already, my business is Creative Crew Agency. We build websites. Now, let's talk about your website for a minute. Most people realize that at this day and age, we need a website, but we don't really know what the website is supposed to do. And sometimes you'll just go and build a website for the sake of building a website. What I do is I make sure that your website actually accomplishes a goal. Now, there are 3 main goals to most websites. Number 1 is to provide information and build credibility. Number 2 is to schedule some sort of appointment and get them onto a sales call. Number 3 is to sell something like an e-commerce site. Now, when you're setting your website, you have to be very mindful that the visitor doesn't know what to do. And so you have to provide them with a roadmap that leads them down a path to wherever you want them to go. On my website, I want them to be on a free consultation. So that's why when you go to creativecrewagency.com, you'll see information about scheduling a free consultation. Now, for you, though, I'm going to provide you with an extra link so that you can get your free website audit. Go to creativecrewagency.com/free website audit and schedule an audit with me. And I'll go through your website live and determine what we can do to improve your conversions and make sure that you're getting the business from your website. Go to creativecrewagency.com and we'll see you there.
You know what I've noticed is that there's a lot of people in the business community, self-employed entrepreneurs that have been on the show, and man, a lot of them mention meditation. I wonder, but I don't see that as much in the general public. The general public sort of thinks that's woo-woo or whatever. I'm wondering, why do you have a theory on why you think that entrepreneurs are more driven more directed towards meditation?
I find that funny when people think it's woo woo. I think it's just about who the person is and where they're at on their journey. Because if they've done any self-development work, or maybe they're religious, well, if they pray, that's a form of meditation. So a lot of people don't know that, so you could be hitting it off and not even doing that. But I think what it is with a lot of entrepreneurs, and that we're constantly putting work into ourselves, and we're figuring out that the meditation style comes. We hear about it, but it intrigues us because we're like, man, I get to have 10 minutes where I can just think, because I know a lot of things are running through my head. I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to close this deal. All these crazy things sometimes that like we don't even take time to decompress for ourselves. And that's where, when we're listening to all this education and really figuring out like, hey, how do we be able to do this? That's where that meditation comes in, where it's been helping. So I did that. And then the breath work, one of my good buddies is a breathwork coach. So he helps me one-on-one and he's like, hey, this is what you can do. Cause I was talking about having anxiety, depression. I don't know what to do sometimes. And sometimes I just start hyperventilating and there goes an anxiety attack. So all that stuff helps you as well. Cause I know that's common within the entrepreneurship, business owners is we take on too much than we can handle. And then when we don't, that's where we start doing dumb things. Why? Because I've done that, been there, you know what I mean? So that's where I think that it's different. It's like people, if you realize where you're at on that spectrum, you're going to be more susceptible to meditation, whatever it is, versus if you're not, then you're not going to really know about it in that. Because at that one point, I started a podcast now. I'm 80 episodes or about to be 80 episodes in. Reality, I've done like 95 because I have 2 segments of my podcast. But before starting a podcast, I was like, I'll never start a podcast. That's dumb. Why do I want to talk? You know what I mean? I'm not Joe Rogan. And then even when I started the podcast, people said the same thing. Why do you want to start a podcast? Everybody has a podcast versus, getting a year into it. And now people are like, hey man, I'd love to come on your show. Oh, I'm like, hey, I'm booked out till June. Oh, you got promotions? I'll pay to come on your show, blah, blah, blah. Like, let's do this. I really want to work with you. And it's game changing to where you're like, man, I just really went from not wanting this at all to getting there, doing it and realizing like, man, that's what I love. Like I used to think that I'm introverted. I can't connect with people versus like jamming with you, brother. And I get to talk to you about these things, open up about it. You get happy, you're opening up to me, and then we become friends. So it's something where it's like podcasting gives us that outlet to share with people because traditionally we don't have these conversations.
No, you're right. You're right. And I think a lot of the reasons why people are scared of meditation is because I think a lot of people are scared of their own thoughts. They're scared to sit down and think. And I kind of get it because when you do start to look inside, then you do start to get triggered by a lot of these things that happened, right? And all of a sudden, those are the things that you're trying to push away, and now you have to think about them. But I think a lot of it is because in self-employment and business, we're leading. We're leaders. We have to have faith in ourselves to be able to do whatever it is we need to do. Whereas as an employee, you don't really. Someone tells you what to do, you do it. You go home, you watch TV. But you can't really lead yourself and have faith in yourself if you don't take the time to explore yourself. Can you?
No, 100% agree with you there again, brother, because you have to figure out for you what's important. I actually posted something about this today. It went I went to my friend and I asked for advice, and he was like, everything that you want to seek is within you. And I was like, what are you talking about? So we started talking about it. Hey, what are you going to do? I told him, he said, do it. And I was like, what are you talking about? That's not good. And I was like, I'm asking for advice. He's like, you have the plan. You know exactly what to do. That's us as people, man. Like, we're flawed. We have so many things, man. It's frightening. I barely a year ago was able to sit in my room and not control my thoughts. I never want to say control because I don't believe you can have absolute control on your thoughts. I believe you could be positive in that, but don't get me wrong. Like sometimes some shit will creep in your head, or maybe you get triggered in that, So to say that we can control everything, yeah, that's being a little much, because there is times where like I'm thinking and then something hits me, or I see something and it hits me, and that's okay. You can process that information. And that was something for me. And that's where I said the cannabis, I started journaling and I started really touching the emotional side and crying it out and really talking about the things I didn't want to. And I was able to use plant-based medicine and really help me towards meditation. It's crying, I'm journaling, I'm processing the emotion. I'm thinking about, hey, what is this feeling? Why do I feel like I want to prove people wrong all the time? Well, maybe it's because of my self-worth. Maybe I felt like as a kid, I was never good enough. My dad was the expert one, good at sports. And then here goes me, the nerdy one, not. Hey, what am I good at? Well, people like me. Why? Because I smile a lot. I compliment them. I just really take an interest in what they're learning and say, oh man, that's cool. If it resonates with me, or ask questions if it's not. So it's something where it's like, I had to be able to realize that for myself. And the more that I worked on that, I trained at it, I told people, versus like staying away from it, even recently, where like the life events were happening. And I'm like, man, religion, it's not my thing. And then I just thought to myself, like, how am I going to be any better if I can't even try to do something that I haven't done before? And maybe that's it. I prayed and said, hey, God, if you're real, let me know. That, not to get too religious on anything, but I was just saying to myself, like, why question it? Just do it. Somebody asks you, talk to them, hey man, I really need help. And like my buddy reached out to me, hey man, I need help. And it was something where he's like, you've never talked to me about that, but I'm really glad you were able to do that. And it's those type actions, doing the things that we traditionally wouldn't do, waking up earlier. Like, you have to be able to force yourself out of your comfortable environment, and getting uncomfortable, feeling that, it is terrifying thinking about those things, being in the room, crying out your emotions, and you've never cried before. So it's something for me where it's like, I'll touch up on that and I'll talk to you as a man and be like, hey, bro, I fucking cried about this. Why? Because my friends died. I didn't process their death till 2-3 years later. And then I'm fucking in deep depression, drinking even more, where it's like, back then I could have just went through it, and I could have just went to the funeral, and I could have done all these necessary steps to help me grieve, but I didn't do that because I'm the tough guy, and that's not what tough guys do.
Well, that's just it. Like, I think that with the gender roles that we've been given, you've got, women, it's okay for women to cry. It's not okay for men to cry. But on the other hand, it's okay for men to be angry, but it's not okay for women to get angry. So it is interesting how they're all emotions, and we need to process them all. If you suppress any of those emotions, bad things are gonna happen to you eventually. But like, we've sort of gotten this, we sometimes just need to give ourselves permission, or maybe sometimes that's where you're hiring a coach, because a coach, oftentimes, like you say, you already have the plan within you. You just need permission to follow your own plan, right?
Exactly, brother. And I think that's what it is. Whether you get that inspiration from you looking yourself in the mirror, having those tough conversations, like, once you allow yourself to say, hey, I'm okay to feel this, I'm okay to be able to process this. Like I said, like with my wife, we fought about dumb shit, and it's not even fucking worth anything. I broke my wedding ring being pissed off, and that's something I have to live with. So it's something for me where it was like, why do I feel this? Why do I get so angry? Why am I letting other people have power over me? And I think when we give ourselves permission to be able to say, it's okay to feel this way, it's okay for me to do this, this is a process on the journey, it's a complete game changer for us.
Yeah. So do you have any instruments that you use, any tools that you use to get success in your business and your life?
So first thing is, I just build genuine relationships with people. So if that's on social media, comment on their stuff, really getting to know them as people, if I feel like they align with me. Again, that's not going to be everybody. You are going to have some doozies where you think they're great people or whatever. Things happen, just be the best you can be. Then it's really the breath work side. I really focus on my breathing, focus on being able to process whatever I'm going through.
So what about learning from the best? I know we've talked about masterminds and we've talked about coaches and all that stuff before. Well, what about you? Like, what has been have you actually, first of all, did you feel any resistance towards getting a coach at first?
Ooh, so I'm going to give everyone some game-changing advice for me. So I just took their promotional offer. So I used to work with Zach Babcock, and when I used to work with him, he dropped a promotional officer $49 a month for podcast coaching. This was before I started the podcast. So I jumped in there, really just started to learn from him. I went through his podcasting course, really started to put the work in. He talks about talking on social media. So I'm opening up about things in my past, really talking about the traumatic events and building on that. It led to me working for him. So I was able to be a moderator for one of the groups he was in, getting people to join his groups, and then eventually started a business partnership with him. So that was my favorite podcast. I got to go on it. I got to be able to talk with him. It was awesome being able to do that. And then at the same time, being able to realize, building some friends to where those are my coaches now. So it was awesome, being able to work with him, jump into this, build a relationship, but at the same time realizing, like, you're going to have different coaches for different areas of your life, different people you go to, and you may get to a point where what you seek in a coach or the person that you're becoming is different than what you're doing right now. So for me, it was really that, even listening to other podcasts and that, hey, some of them I love, but they don't align to who I am right now, what I'm doing. So I'm going to table that, maybe listen later when they're talking about different things, but I'm going to move on and find things that are going to help me out for that. So I think with our coaches, some people think it's one size fits all, because I've heard that sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, man, like, you may have a finance coach, you may have that, it may get expensive. You may have a couple, for me, I have a breathwork coach and I still go to counseling. And it's because those help me with two different things in my life. I have one that gives me what works for me, and then I have another one where I talk things out and I get the professional help. It's not that, both do different jobs. Both of them have a specific function that helps me in that area. Another coach of mine, she's one of my good friends, and she helps me really map out the operational side of my business. And it was something where I had to restart my business for the second time. I'm terrified. She's like, hey, let's do this. You're going to read this book. You're going to do this. We're going to build a website. This is what we're doing. My team's going to help you for free. And it was awesome, being able to do that to where she can normally charge me like $10,000 to build a website, get that. And it was something where it was like, hey, this is what you need to do. I realized, all right, I'm just going to hire somebody. It's not what I'm good at. So taking that focus away from me and putting my energy into something else that I'm good at, the coaches are just going to realize what's the best way for you on what to do. Masterminds, same exact thing. Sometimes they work for you. I love masterminds for the reason of just networking and getting to know people. So I've been fortunate in that of tapping into one mastermind and then another one just befriending a lot of the people. So it's a close-knit circle. So they work for some people. And then there's times where you're in masterminds and you're like, you know what, this is aligned to me, what I'm doing. I'm going to move on to the next thing. And I think that's the most important part is figuring out, hey, what's for you? What community do you want to be in? I've left masterminds. I'm in the masterminds for dads, like I said, and it just allows me to be able to get better at whatever I'm seeking at this time. This is the area I'm focusing on. So it may not be something that you want to stay in there, for 2 years where it's like that first year, you could get everything you need from there. Now you're on to the next chapter in your life.
Yeah. I love that. I love that advice. And you've mentioned the word alignment so many times. I can't agree more because I think that's, I think we've been, a lot of us sort of have this, I guess, programming to be loyal to something far beyond where it's useful for you anymore. Right. And I think that the key there, like you say, is just to be choosing things that are aligned with you and being okay when they're not in alignment with you anymore. Because we're growing, we're changing, they're growing, they're changing. So it's possible that the paths could diverge a little bit and, just give yourself permission to just, drop out of that program and go find one that does work for you, right?
Exactly, brother. And that goes both ways. Like I've been in one where I was just like, you know what, this is cool, but right now I don't have the funds to keep this up anymore. Moved out of it. I was in another one that loved to death because it was one thing changed to another, which was incredible. And then went back to the original. And I was like, you know what? I didn't sign up to come back to the original. I'm going to move on, and it wasn't something that like I was against it. It's just like, nah, man, I went through that process. I'm trying to work on the next thing. I'm trying to work on, before year one of my podcast was talking about me, what shaped me, molded me, talking about dumb things I went through. Year two is on teaching, man. Like I'm about giving on men knowledge to be able to help them at where they're at. Why? Because I've been going through the same thing. So I'm just talking to my younger version of myself. And it's really figuring out that, aligning that portion to where you're at, where you're trying to be, what you're trying to accomplish, is going to change.
Love it. So let's talk about that. Let's get into your guest solos. So tell me what's exciting in your business.
Yeah. So what's exciting in my business is really getting captivating content for podcasters. So I chop up their podcast episodes and I give them YouTube shorts, Instagram reels, Facebooks, TikToks, and really just bringing out the best of their content. And that was something for me that I didn't do. I was doing the audiograms. I heard someone say it to my face, hey, when I see that, I scroll and just keep going. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this video thing out and started building it myself. And that's where, it slowly started to go. You can put your post in there of what it is, but when you give somebody a visual and they're able to see the words you're saying and breaking it down, it changes that. And for me, it was, thinking about maximizing influence is what we used to say and really going into that, but it was breaking it down to me. Man, I'm just trying to help that person that needs to be able to spread their word for whatever it is. Because why I went through the same thing. My podcast is The Winner's Paradigm. We talk about recalibrating your mindset so you can align yourself with your definition of success. Now, one of those portions I'm going into right now is jumping into the level of talking about how we process our emotions, what's holding us back, why we prevented ourselves from being successful and how we're going to get there. Why? Because I've been there. I transitioned out the military thinking I had it figured out, worked multiple jobs, started the business, didn't work out, started my business again. I've been there, done that. So I talk about those things with people and really get them to see that end was, hey, you can do this. And just for my podcast allowed me for people to be like, hey, seeing my work, hey man, what is this? How much do you charge? And it's like, it's different when they ask you versus you pouring all this out. And for me, it was like the business aspect. I was going crazy because I'm trying to figure everything out. I'm trying to do this. I'm paying for ads. It's like, bro, you don't need to do that sometimes. Sometimes you just build genuine relationships. And if it fits, if someone you can be able to help, that's it.
Beautiful. Love it. So how do we find out more then?
Yeah, brother. So easiest way, social media, Alundas_Havens. The podcast is called The Winner's Paradigm, thewinnersparadigm.com. Easiest way to find me.
Awesome. Thewinnersparadigm.com. I love it. So thank you so much for rocking out with me today, Alundas. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you, brother. It was a tremendous honor.
Awesome. And to the listeners, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment. We'll see you next time on the Work at Home Rockstar podcast.